Today I thought it'd be fun to take a Whispers from Eternity that's a little bit of an overreaching, a little bit of a visualization, and we can see that at first it may seem presumptuous for us to pray in this way, but in fact it can be incredibly beneficial for us spiritually to do so. So to prepare us for that, let's take this chant of Swami Kriyananda's Rest in God. And the lyrics are very simple. Rest in God, live in God, in His light, in His light. And we'll sing in His light, in His love, and in His joy. Rest in God, live in God, in His light, in His light. Rest in God, live in God, in His light, in His light. Let's meditate for just a moment together, feeling that we are resting in that light. And continuing to meditate in your heart, listen to these words from Whispers from Eternity and allow them to guide you into an inner mystical experience. I disconnected my awareness from the little garden plot of the senses and switched it to the vast territory of the infinite. The aurora of my awareness spread like dancing waves of light in the aurora borealis and embraced thy cosmic wonderland. When thus I entered that vast panorama, my awareness no longer dulled by the opiate of sensory noises, nor blindfolded by the veil of mere appearances. I stood, marveling before countless streams of radiant, rushing thoughts, rippling through millennia from long dead, still living, and yet to be born civilizations. All time, past, present, future, danced in its infinitude of rhythms on the stage of my all-embracing consciousness. Om. Peace. Amen. This is Whispers from Eternity number 211. Let's see if I can say it. All fortuity danced in me the infinite rhythm. This is a beautiful Whispers from Eternity, and it's what I wanted to talk about with it today, like I mentioned at the beginning, is how to use some of these mystical prayers to help our hearts to aspire to a higher sphere of consciousness. Because we need that. We need encouragement. We need a direction towards which to aspire. And if we were to take these prayers only with our literal ability to understand them, we might never pick up any of these prayers at all, because they seem so far beyond our present awareness. The first sentence of this prayer says, I disconnected my awareness from the small garden plot of the senses. And I thought, I'm not so good at that yet. That experience has maybe come a few times by accident in meditation, more by the grace of God than by my own conscious, aware effort. But it's important for us to remember that this is possible. And so I wanted to briefly discuss visualization as a spiritual tool, because it really is a profound and very effective tool. And it's one that we've seen used in many aspects of our lives. And I'm not talking about visualization as a new age, like success, pep talk sort of way. I mean, really using visualization as a means of honing your heart's aspiration. And recently I've been tuning back into music, tuning back into my cello, playing music and playing music through my cello. And I was realizing that visualization has an easy correlation to music, in that if I were never to listen to a greater performer than myself play, I might never even imagine what is possible. But by listening to great performers, by listening to the greatest cellists of our era, by listening to my teacher, I can imagine what it would be like to play like them. And it thrills my heart. Just recently, I've been playing a concerto for fun that is frankly quite above my capacity to play perfectly. But it is inspiring nonetheless, because I've listened to that concerto hundreds of times. And so when I begin to play some of its simpler phrases, phrases that I myself am capable of, my mind begins to hear the swelling of the orchestra behind my notes. And it thrills me, because it feels like I'm beginning to be lifted by the winds of that inspiration, even though I lack the ability to play it in its entirety. And it's been very moving to me. And so this is sort of what visualization can be in any field, but especially in our divine aspiration, because what we're visualizing in this case is inherently possible and is rooted in truth. It's not a fantasy. For me to visualize, for me to imagine what it would be like to be able to play this concerto is not idle dreaming. In fact, it's quite possible. If I were disciplined and I practiced diligently, in a year or something, I could probably play it quite proficiently. It's just a little bit out of my current reach, but it's well within my capacity. And it's well within anyone's capacity as a human being. As long as you have functioning fingers and a functioning ear, you too can learn. It's just a matter of how long it would take to get there. And this is the same for our spiritual and mystical aspiration, that to us, these states of awareness that Yogananda describes may feel so vastly beyond our present capacity, but in fact, they are not essentially different from what we really are in our own self. It's only a matter, the differentiation is only a matter of degree. It's only a matter of refinement, that just like the greatest cellist in the world basically has the same nervous system as I do, basically plays with the same instrument as I do. It's just that his ability to use those instruments is so much more refined that allows him to play in a way that I can only imagine. And so too, Yogananda writes these mystical prayer poems to show us what we could become and what inevitably we will become. And it's very useful for us to read them, to meditate with them, to pray with them with the deepest aspiration of our hearts. Because just like I was saying in my little concerto, when you begin to be able to play those first opening passages of some of these mystical experiences, there will be such an upsurging of inspiration that will build faith in your heart. Faith that the rest of the mountain is surely achievable, because you have begun to taste the reality of it in your own meditation, in your own experience. And so visualization is not just empty affirmation or egoic overreaching. I called this topic today visualization, overreaching, or aspiration, because it would be foolish of us to affirm something that is not inherently true and is far beyond our present awareness. If we were to do that, it would only create subconscious tension and resistance and a disharmony with truth. But everything that Yogananda writes in this book is inherently true to our own nature. It's only a matter of whether or not we are refined enough in our own awareness to perceive it. And so this becomes a delicate balance, and one that each of us needs to plumb individually. But finding mystical prayers, beautiful chants, devotional self-offering that is just a little bit beyond your present awareness, but yet that you have begun to taste the opening overtures of the concerto, so to speak, to go back to my earlier analogy, then it will tease you into wanting to deepen your experience, to gather more and more of that living reality. And then, in time, this visualization, this process of visualization becomes incredibly powerful as a magnet to actually draw you into that sphere of consciousness. And so, going back to my previous analogy as a musician, it was imperative to my musical education, and still is, to listen to music, to listen to those who are better than myself, who have achieved that which I'm trying to accomplish, and to listen to this beautiful concerto played exquisitely. And as I listen to it, and as my brain and as my consciousness becomes acclimated to its potential, it begins to seem more and more natural to my heart. And then when I sit down to play, if one of my notes is out of tune, I immediately know that that doesn't sound like how it does in my head, so I should try that again. And so the same thing is for us, that if we tune in deeply to these prayers, even if it's just as a visualization or as a divine aspiration, then when we sit in our meditation, it can act as a roadmap to help direct us towards a deeper, true mystical experience. And over time, this consciousness we can begin to carry with us more and more and more. Just like how if you get a song stuck in your head, it will play repetitively on loop in the back of your consciousness. And this is how you really become absorbed in something. And we can become absorbed in the delusions of this world with finances and money and fear. And we can become absorbed also in the contemplation of our infinite potential. And whatever we concentrate on, we go towards speedily. And so learning to engross ourselves in a mystical potential, even if it's just a visualization, an affirmation, an aspiration, will magnetize us into that divine ray. So let's listen to this Whispers from Eternity again. And let's take it as a divine aspiration. Trying and use your imagination. Try and feel not just the words on an intellectual level, but try to experience them as if these were the words you would use to describe your own living, present reality. Try to imagine what it would feel like, both in your body, but also in your heart, in your mind. Try and visualize it not just in light, but in sound and in sensation and in the deepest experience that you're able. So I encourage you now to close your eyes and try to experience this deeply with me and magnetize this with your divine aspiration. So first, let's send up a little prayer to God and let's ask God, Yogananda, to give us a glimpse of what this living reality truly is, to bless us that we may understand it more deeply. And then relaxing in the heart, let's feel the vibrations of our heart softening to become receptive to this truth. I disconnected my awareness from the little garden plot of the senses and switched it to the vast territory of the infinite. The aurora of my awareness spread like dancing waves of light in the aurora borealis and embraced thy cosmic wonderland. When thus I entered that vast panorama, my awareness no longer dulled by the opiate of sensory noises, nor blindfolded by the veil of mere appearances. I stood marveling before countless streams of radiant, rushing thoughts, rippling through millennia from long dead, still living, and yet to be born civilizations. All time, past, present, future, danced its infinitude of rhythms on the stage of my all-embracing consciousness. And let's feel for a moment, what would that expanded awareness be like? To feel yourself, as he says and with that all-embracing consciousness. Can you feel already a sense of calm descending upon your heart? A sense of an expanded awareness of your reality? A sense of feeling that your home resides in yourself and less in your physical body, less on this earth? Can you feel this already beginning to plant the seeds of the truth that there is no time? That you are observing the phenomenon of past, present, and future, these streams of time like golden rivers of light flowing through all infinity. Isn't that beautiful? This prayer has so much to offer us. If we can truly live in this way, well, what would there be to fear? We could feel that our home is ever in the infinite. I can feel just by reading this prayer a few times and trying to tune into it over the last few days in preparation for this, it's helped just a little bit dislodge me from the delusion that this world is my home and that I am bound to this specific moment in time. We are timeless. All thoughts of men, past, present, future, to come, of yet unborn civilizations flow effortlessly through your consciousness. Isn't that incredible? We're not bound by this little body or limitations, but we are so much bigger than we possibly think. And for me, when I begin to think in that way, it helps me to relax. And when I am able to relax, I'm able to enjoy a little more deeply. Because if we're constantly squeezing our hearts, it's like squeezing a sponge too tightly, that it wrings out all of the sweet nectar of God's presence from our awareness. But when we're able to relax, then it allows ourselves, our heart, to be a little bit more receptive to the constant flow of now, of God's presence in this living reality. And for me, remembering that this moment is not truly my home, but that I live in infinity and in timelessness, helps me to relax. And I hope it helps you to relax as well. So now I'd like to take a few moments and unpack some of the incredible imagery that he uses in this poem, just to help you in your visualization, and hopefully myself as well. Because when we do visualizations, it's important, and I've talked about this at the beginning of this series, it's important to try and understand them, to not dissect them in a nitpicking way, but to plumb them, to mine the depths of each image that he uses, and to explore it with your imagination until you can create a crack in the veil that separates you from that reality, even if it's just in imagination. But what's interesting is, from my time as an actor, I happened to learn that the part of your brain, if I remember correctly, that is associated with the part of your mind that imagines realities is actually the same place in your brain that remembers past memories. So imagination and memory are very, very similar in the brain. And this is very useful to us as yogis, that we can fabricate, or not really fabricate, but like smriti, remember divine memory. We can spark that through our imagination. So we want to use our imagination like a child would, with great interest and with vibrant colors and with all of the investigation of your interested will. So now let's take a look again. I disconnected my awareness from the little garden plot of the senses. Now already, that was just the second word, disconnected. That's such a thrilling word in this context because it makes it sound almost instantaneous. And it also makes it sound rather effortless, doesn't it? If you've ever disconnected a power outlet from the wall socket, it takes just a second. You just go, and it's over. And the power switch it's done. Or if you've ever just simply switched a light switch on or off, it's disconnected. It's on or off, and it just takes a moment. Click, and it's done. Imagine that. I disconnected my awareness from the little garden plot of the senses. What would it be like? And Yogananda says that true yogis are able to do this. What would it be like to be able to feel the current of your consciousness moving into the senses and to have so much conscious control of that, that just like flipping a light switch, you could disconnect it from these sense telephones and just think And that would mean that no longer would you hear the distractions, the constant chaos and noise of the world, but you would hear Om. That instead of feeling the constant presence of this body, you would suddenly be free and boundaryless. And that instead of needing to see with your physical eyes, you could see, as he says later in this prayer, in panorama, effortlessly expanding, penetrating into the heart of all creation. That's what it means to be able to disconnect yourself from the senses. It's really quite a thrilling proposition already. And really, that skill is possible. The ability to just pull ourselves away from the senses. And it's something that we can begin to practice in our daily lives. Myself, when I practiced energization very vigorously, it taught me how to do this to a small degree. That by tensing and relaxing the body, we learn to direct will into our bodies, and then we learn how to withdraw it. And learning how to withdraw energy from our body is actually equally, if not more important to the yogi than learning how to drive more energy, more will into any particular tissue. Because really what we're trying to learn how to do is withdraw the life force, right? And so when we practice something like energization, really become consciously aware of that interiorizing, withdrawing effect of energy. And I discovered that through the practice of energization, I developed a little bit of an uncanny ability to fall asleep almost instantaneously. And it sounds really silly, and it is in fact. And since I've lessened my practice of energization, this siddhi has sort of lessened a little bit. But especially during that period of time, at the end of the day, I would lie down in bed and I would feel a very real current of energy moving through my body, through my nervous system, through my senses. And by closing my eyes and exhaling consciously, I would magnetize through visualization and through the use of my will. I would try to feel that I was withdrawing the energy out of my peripheral senses and out of my organs and into the deep river of my spine. And within just a few breaths, I would suddenly find myself waking the next morning without having moved. Like I slept like a corpse, without moving, without rolling, without waking. And it would be a deep and dreamless sleep. That I would just go into this place of deep stillness and peace and awake feeling so rejuvenated when I did this properly. And my girlfriend would comment and sort of wryly complain that I would fall asleep in a matter of seconds, and it would sometimes take her an hour to be able to relax deeply enough. And it was energization that taught me how to do that, to disconnect myself from the senses. Now, interestingly, Yogananda says that we should be able to disconnect ourselves from the senses and go instantaneously into subconsciousness, which was sort of what I was working on. But he also said we should be able to go instantaneously into super consciousness. And that's really what we should be exploring, and one that I have not yet perfected. The aurora of my awareness spread like dancing waves of light in the aurora borealis and embraced thy cosmic wonderland. Isn't that a beautiful analogy? My awareness spread like dancing waves of light in the aurora borealis, so effortless, so joyful, so free, so light, not just in the quality of luminance, but in the effortlessness that this implies. When thus I entered that vast panorama, my awareness no longer dulled by the opiate of sensory noises, nor blindfolded by the veil of mere appearances, I stood, marveling before countless streams of radiant rushing thoughts, rippling through millennia from long dead, still living, and yet to be born civilizations. And this is one of the things that I'd like to highlight here is sometimes we're afraid that by giving up this body, that by giving up the senses, that we'll be downgrading our awareness or that we will have less capacity to experience. But in fact, Yogananda consistently promises that the opposite is actually true. That he says, no longer dulled by the opiate of sensory noises. Think of that. that your awareness is being dulled as if by an opiate drug, by the senses, by our infatuation with the material world. What would it be like to shuffle that off? It would probably feel like the greatest inhalation you ever took of, at last I can breathe again, at last I can see again. Nor blindfolded by the veil of mere appearances. That's worth meditating on. How often are we seduced by the mere appearances of outward worlds and Maya? I stood marveling before countless streams of radiant, rushing thoughts. And I think I'll close just with this thought that, like I said, each of us can begin to taste some of what Yogananda is talking about in these prayers, both through our sincerity, both by asking for his specific grace to bless us with a deeper awareness of these truths, but also through our own sadhanas. Sometimes our sadhanas may not feel flashy or like we're drawing the benedictions of God, but I'm sure each of us have had those moments when a deeper vista unveils itself. Perhaps it's in subtle ways, an experience of an expanding peace, or of deep calmness, or perhaps just the beginning experience of light at the spiritual eye. I have been blessed with a few experiences of, I think, a slightly deeper experience of inner realities, not so much by my own skill, but I would almost say by dumb luck, except for that I know that it's not luck, it's by divine grace. But those experiences have become gems in my memory to remember that that is essentially real, and that if only I could hold that reality in my heart more consciously, more diligently, then just like listening to these concertos and holding their vibration in your consciousness will certainly speed towards the mastery we need to live in that state of consciousness all the time. So may we be one in that light someday, and I'll see you next week, my friends. Rest in God, live in God, in His light, in His light. Rest in God, live in God, in His light, in His light. Rest in God, live in God, in His Rest in God, live in God, in His joy, in His joy. Rest in God, live in God, in His light, in His light. Rest in God, live in God, in His light, in His light. Rest in God, live in God, in His light, in His light. Rest in